History cites it beginning in the 60s in Stonewall in New York, led by two transgender women, one black, one Latina, basically saying, we ain't had enough.
Oh.
And if we can't have it, y'all ain't gonna have it. We're gonna burn it down. So when we look at sort of creating opportunities, we are not a monolith as a people. That meaning we have different interests. You know, you have the house and ball children, you have the academia girls, you have the martini traveling the world girl. So no one event speaks to us as an entirety. So we should not force ourselves to sort of create this one experience that's supposed to serve us as a whole. Because we as black people, particularly us on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, we share identities. And so long, historically, society has said we have to pick which parts of ourselves to celebrate. We get to show up as full people who represent multiple experiences. I think it's only apt that we have a presence in all of these spaces.
There go my people. There go my people. What's going on? Look at y'all.
Don't be rude.
Yeah.
It's coming
over.
So what we got cooking, Sean?
Fish and chips. We crossed the pond for a classic fish dish. Beer batter cod with chips make a perfect pub or party pairing. Served with homemade tartar sauce for dipping. Now I wanted to ask y'all, now that Juneteenth is an official holiday,
True.
do you feel like it's different, like trying to celebrate Juneteenth and Pride in the same month?
No, not really. I mean, I think that, now that it's official, it just might be interesting to see how people of color, especially black people, would celebrate Pride Month and Juneteenth when Juneteenth comes. So that's an interesting question.
Our guest that's coming, Gerald Garth. He does a lot of work with the intersection of blacks and gays, so I think we're going to talk to him a little bit about that today.
That's a
as
great
well.
conversation. I like
Wonderful.
it. Y'all
I'm
enjoy
looking forward to
yourselves.
that.
I'm looking forward to it.
Dedicated activist Gerald Garth has always had one mission: to serve and represent for the most underrepresented in both the Black and LGBTQIA spaces.
If I were to say what is the thread that weaves all of my work together, it is being a voice and a friend to the friendless and voiceless.
Gerald has worked tirelessly to empower the community by helping to launch Global Black Pride, functioning as board treasurer and director of community programs at LA Pride, and as a co-founder of Black LGBTQ Activists for Change. Gerald describes it as a reminder that we are stronger together.
To dream with pride means to show up authentically and unapologetically and fully in oneself.
Gerald, currently the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, is a true teacher and agent of change.
Sean raised an interesting question in the kitchen regarding this intersection between blackness and gayness with Juneteenth and gay pride. And I didn't really have a reaction to that. It's like I hadn't really thought about it. So I'm kind of curious as to, is this suddenly something that we've got to think about, make a choice about what we celebrate?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that what happens is it's kind of funny because now that it's a national holiday, it just kind of feels like, okay, now more people know about it than the people who actually recognized it and supported it before. And now it just seems a bit more global in some way, in some respects. And Pride is extremely global. So that now when we're looking at sort of Juneteenth here, should there be some attention paid to kind of the Black experience in the U.S., in the gay community, since a lot of the Pride activities don't necessarily highlight specifically the Black experience. And I think kind of like our show.
What you're saying, global, like all over the United States, it tends not to do that.
Well, no, I was just saying, like our show, we're highlighting the Black experience of being a part of the LGBTQIA plus arena, and so that here is now within Pride Month, there's this new acknowledgement of Juneteenth. So is it possible or necessary to create some kind of recognition around one thing or another? I don't see how they necessarily intertwine. So
Do you see?
The food is good, y'all.
I'm gonna dive in on
Why I'm
that.
always the
Do
first
you
one
see?
eating?
Do you see? Maybe since it's Gay Pride, how about do we see the converse where there's more gay inclusion in Juneteenth events, Black gay?
That'll be interesting.
Well, I don't know about Juneteenth. That's kind of a new official holiday. I know a lot of people have been celebrating it, but my perspective is I celebrate Pride Month all year, and then
Right.
Juneteenth is something I'm just learning about. I don't come from a community, a culture that we celebrated it, so that's also kind of a year-round kind of a celebration. But I know that there's always been, from my experience, a separate Black Pride event because of the non-acceptance of Black people in white LGBTQ spaces. So that's just something I'm used to. I don't know how that's evolved.
But now that Black Pride events have typically been social events. They've not been heavily wrapped in activism, although a lot of activism activities will happen around Black Pride as well. But kind of the creation of them was creating, like, I think, kind of a social space where there was kind of this comfortable gathering.
Was it because of the exclusion in Pride? Period.
I think in some way it was a bit of that. I mean, there's kind of just racism in general,
Yeah.
and so that also exists in the gay community. So
and in
I
our
think
Black community, huh?
well, no,
Oh.
well, I wouldn't use the same term for that, but sort of biases and prejudices I would use. I would not use racism, but
So it's not racism
Well,
in our
one of the
community.
things, though, Black Gay Pride doesn't necessarily happen in June.
it does not.
So when we talk about June being Pride Month, that has traditionally been associated with the broader gay community. Because, for example, in Los Angeles, the activity was in July because it was around ATB and at the beach, and so that was the whole Black gay experience.
How did it switch
right?
to June?
and in different
And
switched
in
into
DC, it was a
cities.
different month.
Oh.
In Chicago.
different
So across the country, Black Prides have happened at some in the fall. So it hasn't traditionally been specifically June. So when we talk about this idea of whether or not these events were created as a response to lack of Black inclusion in the broader gay community, there probably is some impetus to that. But now, since we have this national Black holiday that's going to be falling in the same time period as what has become known around the world as Gay Month. June is Gay Month.
Okay.
Especially in the U.S. And we're talking all your major networks. Everybody participates, right?
Yeah.
So I think that when Sean posed that question, it hadn't even occurred to me,
Yeah.
that this is potentially a conflict, or how are the media outlets going to balance this whole idea of Juneteenth and Gay Pride? Because Gay Pride gets a lot of play
A lot of attention.
on the major networks,
Yes.
sponsor, everywhere, right?
So you're saying Juneteenth will up the awareness that Black gay people are people too.
But then at the end of the day, I feel like that's also a little bit kooky because Juneteenth has nothing to do with pride.
No.
But I wouldn't it be great if people who are celebrating African American culture have a time to celebrate the contributions of queer African American people?
You're probably not the only Black that don't know about it. Feel me?
Well, I mean, I think, touche. And here's the thing. Aaron said this is something I'm just learning about. So then now all of a sudden, you're just learning about it. And now let's add pride to it.
They're gonna feel like we're co-opting a holiday that has nothing to do with queer people.
Right. It's not. That's not the focus. so
Right.
that it's
Maybe
about
it took
black
away.
people and, slavery and kind of, freedom. And it's not about how you live your lifestyle.
Well, what better way to celebrate freedom than with Black queer
And
inclusion?
let me
Hello.
say this,
Come on now.
wait, let me say this. About 8 months ago, it hit me. I was like, what am I calling myself a slave for? I'm like, dang, they did a darn good job.
What were you wearing?
You
you
snatch
have on an
kings
outfit?
and queens, and then they slaves? No, enslaved, baby. We kings and queens. Enslaved by enslavement. Demons, definitely, we're not slaves.
This is good.
Yeah, the most powerful of all.
I mean, I'm still pondering this because I'm thinking you made a good point, but this idea of co-op, I was like, that's interesting. But is it, what if we looked at it as an opportunity?
Yes, great. I like that.
But then would black people embrace that? Because again, if I'm now wanting to embrace just my blackness on this particular day, does my orientation or any of that, is that relevant to what I'm celebrating that day? And I say that because we've got, you know what I'm saying? We've got Pride Month. This is a whole month where we're actually looking into and highlighting and recognizing. So I say yes, let's push for the inclusion, but does it need to be connected to Juneteenth? Does it need to be that day when we want to bring people's awareness to why Juneteenth exists?
A lot of heterosexual identifying black people think that queer black people have to choose between being queer and being black.
Yes.
And it's kind of what you're implying now. Which
Yeah, I
one,
was surprised at that.
Choose your blackness on this day. Celebrate your gayness in Pride Month. But it never goes away. So it's always
I'm not
at the
saying
same
that.
time.
I'm saying that, there are people like yourself who are black who were unclear on Juneteenth. But as soon as the idea of combining the two together, you were like, oh, okay, yeah, Pride, Juneteenth. Let's just mix them together. And I'm saying, why?
Because
So
this
you're
is a
saying
day.
let that day be?
Okay, I'll do you one better. What was your gay event that you went to for MLK? For that holiday?
I didn't.
Okay. So
But
now what would
MLK
you
Day is
what
in
would you
January and not during Pride Month. So that's why that's a great, as you say, opportunity to
So
combine the two.
because it's in Pride Month, the idea of merger is necessary because it's led by the pride.
Well, they happen at the same time. They overlap. And for us, these
Which
two
one
things
happened
overlap.
first? Not which one got
Okay, the fair.
official first.
Fair.
But which one happened first?
Fair, yes.
Which one did
Your-
happen first?
Your
Skin color?
Your skin color comes out before
Oh,
you
look,
have a
I
sexual
had to double
identity.
check.
Is that what you
had
meant?
me mixed up.
No,
You're talking about the date. I mean, which holiday?
Which
Oh,
event?
in the
Which
calendar.
Yeah, which
current?
started first. Yeah.
I like the point about which one happened first.
We were born black
You're
first.
born black first. That's an interesting point.
That's a true point.
So that now, why should we be worried about shuffling something,
Gay into Juneteenth. Just leave Juneteenth alone.
Leave Juneteenth alone.
Now, and I'm not saying that I'm opposed to anyone collaborating and creating something that makes sense. I just think, I just feel, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say it.
Go on and say
Before
it.
you say it, Chris,
We say it
we're
in
going
the
to go
house.
to break.
We say
And
it.
we come back. Brace ourselves
I know, because
I'm
y'all
gonna
know,
go
y'all
whatever
know.
Chris is about to say.
Woo, right. Oh, Lord.
Go on and preach.
Okay.
Go on and preach.
Okay. All right. I'm not just speaking for me, but I just want to say that as I'm hearing this discussion, I just keep thinking that the gay agenda seems to be a little pushy. It's like in a lot of ways, people are feeling very overwhelmed by the community. So the LGBTQIA plus at large, it seems to now, in its expansion and recognition, it seems to be a bit overpowering.
It's got power.
It's got power.
Ooh, baby.
And so, and in that power, it in many ways, it seems to have surpassed Black power.
Okay.
And so, and which is why when we were looking at the whole idea of the LGBTQ or the gay pride month, and then now we've got Juneteenth, it's the idea of, okay, so because Juneteenth happened to be recognized in a month that has been recognized as Pride Month, now we need to do something gay around it.
Okay.
It's coming to the party, right?
Because the gays got to have something, because which is why I was saying, can Juneteenth just be Juneteenth, and it doesn't have to be a gay agenda attached to it. So
They can happen at the same time. As we said in the first episode, these struggles can fight for their struggles together. They don't have to fight against each other. You don't have to say, we're Black, you're getting too many rights, you gay people, we need to get some rights. That's unnecessary tension. And
it's not an against. It's the idea is it necessary to be partnered up?
Yes.
Thank you. It is necessary.
Yes, it's necessary. And this idea that it's the gay agenda, I mean, that just kind of,
just
got
those
me a
words
little
together.
bit. Yeah, it's. I don't know what the
Human
gay
ag-
agenda is.
human-
I've been gay a
human
long
agenda?
time. I don't know what you know what the gay agenda.
I do know what the gay agenda
What is the gay
I check
agenda?
my email, and they send out a notice weekly on what we're going to accomplish that week.
And do you get the email?
See, that's the problem.
Because there isn't one. I mean, I think
This whole thing about the gay agenda, well, our guest that's coming, Gerald, he's going to be able to really speak to this, because I really want to dig into this.
as a matter of fact, speak of the devil. Here we go.
I guess I should wait till the guests get here before.
Hey, Gerald, come on in. How you
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Matt's right here.
Wonderful.
So good to
to
see.
get
We just.
some
Oh, we got someone to talk to you about.
Hi, you're welcome.
Thank
Join
you.
us.
Yes.
Skin is on
is
glow.
Gerald.
Chocolate.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
This is our chef Sean. He's going to plate you.
Welcome to the house. Thank you.
Right.
Wonderful.
What we got, Sean?
We feed you around here.
I see.
Fish escabeche. This Jamaican jewel is sure to please. Crispy fried red snapper topped with pickled peppers will have your taste buds popping.
Thank you.
This is a popular Jamaican dish.
I already hit the knife to double check. It's good, Sean. It's good.
So I want us to jump right in.
Let's go.
We've been having a very interesting conversation about this intersection between Blackness and gayness, and the LGBTQIA plus community, and the Black community, and we were talking about Juneteenth, and how that's fallen in the same month as, since it's now been recognized nationally, it's happened during the same time as Pride, and we have some differences of opinion. And I know you've done a lot of work in this space, so we'd love to hear your perspective on just now that we're facing these two holidays that have national prominence during the same month. How do we navigate this?
Well, I think it's really interesting because we as Black people, particularly us on the LGBTQ plus spectrum, we share identities. And so long, historically, society has said we have to pick which parts of ourselves to celebrate. And so when we look at it in the sense of we get to show up as full people who represent multiple experiences, I think it's only apt that we have a presence in all of these spaces.
And I think that's something what we were talking about.
What a way to put it.
It all happening simultaneously. I think that you were coming from a little bit different perspective of more of why does queerness have to be interjected into Juneteenth?
And if I could add, I mean, we've always been around. We just have been
I was thinking
silently
the same
so.
thing.
And so
on
with this,
Juneteenth, we were there when they came and said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you you're free." We were there then.
we've been around. It's just now an opportunity for us to show up loudly and proudly.
Chris says that the gay agenda has gone too far. What do you think?
I did not say that.
That's exactly what you said.
No,
That is not what I
now
said.
listen to this.
Now,
You
I
said,
love what you heard, but that's not what I said.
because I came back and said, "It's game power, baby."
Well, I mean, for me, it's the idea that Juneteenth is uniquely something special. And Aaron, who said, I didn't know nothing about Juneteenth. So do you spend more time learning about the relevance of Juneteenth to who you are on Juneteenth? Or do you now focus on your gayness and whatever that is relevant to you as on Juneteenth, when you still don't understand Juneteenth?
So if I could add, if I may, I think this is where, again, the uniqueness of our experience comes up, because, again, that puts us in this binary space where we're having to focus, prioritize, deprioritize portions of ourselves when we get to show up in the world as full people. And so there's a presence for us as Black LGBTQ plus people in Juneteenth. There's a presence for us in the gay or sort of LGBTQ experiences. What we have seen is that oftentimes there are experiential differences. So when we look at sort of creating opportunities, we are not a monolith as a people. That meaning we have different interests. You have the house and ball children, you have the academia girls, you have the martini traveling the world girls. So no one event speaks to us as an entirety. So we should not force ourselves to sort of create this one experience that's supposed to serve us as a whole. We are not one individual people. We are individuals who make up a beautiful and rich tapestry of Black people.
And just to hear you say, show up as your full self.
Yes.
My heart raced.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing.
That's a wonderful thing.
I love it, yes.
I like that.
I mean, and that's really what we're about here. We want you to be able to show up as your full self.
So I'm thinking about that and
all I
going
can.
precisely as we were talking earlier, right?
Yeah, and for so long we have not had that opportunity. What we've seen is there have been only so few spaces created, so we've been forced to move ourselves into spaces that have been created, as opposed to us bringing our authentic selves into spaces.
Right
So what
now,
we're
I
seeing-
have to say thank you.
Yes.
That's real
yes.
talk. This is so
Absolutely.
unique.
I think so.
What did you feel?
Well, I hear that and I get that. I guess my question is then, and where there seems to now be a little bit of angst and a little bit of pushback, is that as the LGBTQIA plus community is expanding and growing and becoming more recognized in ways that it has not been before. And a lot of your work that you've been doing has created more exposure and visibility in that way, that then it's about that idea of change, and change makes people uncomfortable. And too much change at once makes them resistant. So that it's the idea of, okay, so how are we creating the change? How are we adapting? How are we pulling people in a way where they actually feel like they're not being pushed out? I can't tell you how many people, tell me the whole, I'm non-binary and this, and the thing is, but they say it with the idea that being binary or choosing binary is not good enough. And so that, again, you have your choices, and that's fine. Those are your choices. Yay. And so, but my choices are not wrong because they're not your choices, or my choices are not fallible because they've been historic choices. They're still my choices. And if I want to stick with history and how the way things have been, I should have that right to do so without you now thinking that I'm not woke, or I'm not I'm in the shadows, or I'm in the dark about how things are progressing. And I think that's what I'm saying is that again, when you still have people who don't even understand what Juneteenth is in its uniqueness, now adding something else to it, I'm saying, okay, well, can we at least learn and understand what its uniqueness is first? That's all.
But what we were really going for, and I think you hit on it, was that there was an opportunity. It isn't about displacing what it is. It isn't about it not being able to be what it is. But I think this idea of being able to bring your full self, and what we're very clear about, most Black people, is that sometimes you do have to negotiate away your gayness in certain Black spaces. So it might be fine that grandma knows you're gay, but don't bring that to her Thanksgiving dinner. And if you bring your partner with you, that's your roommate.
That's your roommate, that's your
So
classmate, yeah.
these things become, that whole idea, don't throw it up in my face. Like, what is that? So when you're talking about being able to be your fullness and bring your full, because I'm not gay one day, Black one day. This is me every day, all
I'm just
day,
not
right?
putting in a box.
In all spaces.
I'm
So I'm not going to negotiate out
any particular one because I'm in the gay room, and we can talk about sort of this, how blacks are received in the broader gay community, because I'm not going to code switch there either. You know, I'm going to bring me. But like you said earlier, that I walk a certain way and I talk a certain way, so I don't get the same.
No, I said you was a thug. That's what I
And what I think, Antonio, come on, thug. What this does also, it gives us an opportunity to invite folks who have been disengaged from our experience. So what happens is, for so long, we have only allowed certain portions of ourselves to show up. So what that does is only allows certain representations of our community to show up. So while it does take a brave sort of innovation to be able to show up unapologetically, it's necessary. We look at sort of the progress we've seen in just humankind in the last 50 years on how we get to show up. You know, we look at it from fashion and film and, you know, mental wellness. There's all these things that were taboo or unacceptable or had a different definition just a few years ago. So even now, things that have become so normal to us was a challenge. But somebody had to say, you know what, we're going to normalize this. We are going to not create these spaces, these boxes, these darknesses, and show up fully. And now we benefit from that. And so we can think of it as these innovations that we're creating as opportunities for those who are far from us to benefit. And I think it is necessary.
Because dis-ease in the mind
Yes, indeed.
create the disease in the body.
Yes, and I know you have a,
Ooh,
yeah,
baby.
so thank you.
It
Let's
pays
take
to
a
show
break.
up as your full
It
self.
does.
Let's take a break here and come back and pick up on that.
Absolutely. Thank
Welcome
you.
to the house.
Yes, thank
you can take a bite. I'm so sorry.
you. No, I've been having a little negative.
Jumped in. We jumped
Please,
in.
You know, yeah.
So, Jerry, you do a lot of the work that you do is feeds right into this concept that we were talking about of being able to be your full self. And tell us about some of that work. I mean, it's, like I was saying earlier, your resume is rich. And so I'd like you to really kind of zero in on some of the things that you're doing and facilitating that's helping to change that experience.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so just really briefly, so I'm the former COO of the Ahmad Institute. Ahmad is Arming Minorities Against Addiction and Disease. Based in South LA, we do program services, events, and activities for Black LGBTQ plus people in South LA or South Central. And so looking at housing, continued education, mental and behavioral health, leadership development, and just a breadth of sort of services that uniquely impact Black LGBTQ plus folks. I also am the founder of BLAC, which is Black LGBTQ plus Activists for Change, and that organization has the mission to amplify, elevate, and highlight the contributions and experiences of Black and Black LGBTQ plus people. Also, most recently, now serve as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the LA LGBT Center, and a number of other things as well. But like you said, most of my work is really looking at how do we look at the unique experiences of Black LGBTQ plus people and Black communities at large to, one, elevate and empower us as a people, but also address systems of inequity as well.
Can you expand on that?
What? You got a question there?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Just
I'll come back.
About your work with Ahmad, if there's a viewer watching and they have a substance abuse problem that they're trying to overcome, how would you advise them? What is the secret?
Yeah, so there's no secret. Getting support, getting connected to folks who can really help you throughout your journey. We have a team at Ahmad of substance and recovery specialists. We have transitional living homes for individuals who need support in their recovery. I would say connect to the team at Ahmad at www.ahmad.org or any space in which you see that can help you in your journey. There are a number of faith-based approaches as well. I'm a man of faith in that regard as well, and sometimes you just need to, what I say, lean on something bigger than yourself to get yourself going. And so sometimes that might be your beginning of your journey as well. So to that I would say just be open to leaning on something bigger than yourself.
What made you ask, Aaron? For others? So put it out there so that they can want to gravitate towards.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can't do it by ourselves.
That's right.
I always say it's not the substance. I stopped shooting dope on February 11th, 1985. I found sobriety.
Yes.
I found serenity about 2 years ago.
Amen. Yeah.
It's not the substance.
It is a journey.
Yeah, and
It's a journey.
it's nothing about that we put in. It's all inside here. So for you to ask that question and encourage people, reach out. You by yourself. We're here for you.
That's right.
Am I right?
The experience for so many of us, you know, in the work, but also just in recovery, I say all the time, is that you don't necessarily have to be experiencing substances to be in recovery. Recovery prevention is as much as being in recovery as anything else. And so, like you said, recognizing the impacts of isolation is also very, very important. And I know in these last few years, the impact we've seen with COVID and just what the world has looked like, many of us have never had this level of sort of these impacts in which we've had to respond. So many of us use tools that we only know.
Yeah.
And so much of the process is to help us find other tools to help us throughout our process. So thank you for sharing that.
Most definitely.
What I wanted to ask you about was this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because quite frankly, I feel like it's the new buzz
It's such a,
phrase.
such a thing, yeah.
And it's
Buzzwords.
great. Yeah, and because we've been down this path before. And I remember being in a meeting recently where we were talking about this very topic. And actually, it was a group of people that was working on a grant. And I said to them, I said, you know, you can pepper that proposal with those beautiful words, but the reality is African Americans has been on the bottom of disparity lists, at the top of disparity lists, I should say.
And the bottom of outcomes list.
At the bottom of outcomes list for history. And so now that we have these nice 3 new words, diversity, inclusion, and equity and inclusion, what really is being proposed and what's really going to change? So I heard you say that you sit on a body in that space, and I'm curious as to what you see as a difference in the conversation today, because you're not new to this.
Right.
You're not new to work, right? And what are you seeing as difference in the conversation, if any, as we move forward with trying to make an impact?
I think that's great, Antonio, because you're right. It has been, you know, we have had our seasons of buzzwords and fad phrases and certain things, and that DEI has been one of them, particularly most recently. And when I sort of moved more succinctly in this element of the work, that was a major question that I had, because there's been some, you know, institutional seeking of individuals who can sort of help organizations move to the next level. And so I lead with, you know, we lead with leaning away from DEI and leaning into DSR, which is this dismantling systems of racism. And so when we look at it through the lens of how is this, whatever be the system, the policy, the programs, the funding, how are we seeing disproportionate either resourcing or impacts among communities? And so I always say, or you know, regularly we'll talk about, when we talk about equity, equity means resources. Equity means you need to align the dollars to where the need is.
Absolutely.
And
so,
if it don't make no dollars, it just don't make no sense.
and that's the proposal right
That's
there.
a show no truth.
Then that's, where do I sign?
It's a fact, baby.
It is a fact, yeah. And so these conversations, you know, sometimes they're considered hard conversations. I don't think so. You know, the hard component is how committed are you truly to impacting this space? And also one thing is that looking at, again, I say it's a two-lane highway. There is the dismantling of the structure piece, but then it's also the uplifting of the people piece. You know, we as Black people have been told, you're at the bottom of this, you're at the bottom of that. That has impact on us.
Absolutely.
To only see ourselves reflected on the worst of things. And so at the same time, while
Even though we know they lying.
yeah, or it's like, well, yes, you see that in such a snapshot. Well, I'm the lowest here because I ain't got no money for this because of this. So again, there goes the system piece. So while we address the system, also looking at what are we doing to uplift and celebrate us too, because we bring so much richness to the world, and these data will often have us thinking otherwise. And so looking at it systemically, we should be, again, resourcing properly, but uplifting and celebrating us along the way.
Very well put. Thank you so much. We're going to take a break,
Yes.
and then when we come back, we're going to continue this
Okay,
conversation.
well, wonderful. Thank you.
Right.
Welcome to the house. We're happy to have you.
So, Gerald, we were talking about resources and things that are available in the community, and one of the things is oftentimes we aren't even aware of what's available. And so, why don't you talk to us about some of the stuff that you're doing in the community?
Sure, yeah. So like I mentioned, Ahmad doing great work in South LA and throughout LA County. Another organization, In the Meantime Men's Group, providing programs specifically for gay, bisexual, and other same-gender loving men. There is Black Women for Wellness, which is an organization in South LA that centers the needs of Black women and families. There is an organization called the Unique Woman's Coalition that provides services for Black transgender women. There's an organization or an effort called The Village, which has an initiative called AIM. AIM is an acronym for the African American Infant and Maternal Mortality Initiative. So that looks specifically at the needs of Black mothers, children, and families. So there are a number of institutions, organizations that are Black-led, Black-serving, Black-celebrating that exist. And so we have some great opportunity to connect with those agencies.
You know, you riddled off quite a list there, so we need to make sure that
Yes,
we
and I'm
make
personally
those
connected to all of
available
those
so
agencies,
people who are
so
watching
I can help.
know how to get in touch with them.
Fantastic.
And so that's what you're doing locally, right? So is there some other things that you're doing? I know you didn't fill in a few things in there that you're doing locally in the community.
So, along with the work that I'm doing locally with LA Pride, I'm the vice president of LA Pride. We are also really excited for our first in-person global Black Pride. And so very excited about that. It has been virtual since its inception in 2020. We had a virtual experience in 2021, so this is our very first experience. This year we'll be in Toronto. So we're in partnership with Pride Toronto and an organization in Toronto that does great work for the Black community, African, Black and Caribbean community called BLACO. So we're in partnership with those organizations from June 23rd through 26th. So very excited about that.
How did that come about, and why is a Black global Pride necessary?
So like we've been mentioning, even at dinner, is that our Black American experience looks so different. So when we look at what that looks like globally, we can imagine all of the nuances and experiences and opportunities there. But one thing also I like to remind folks is that Pride began as a protest. And so Pride is really centered around equity, visibility, change making, and some of the things that we've been talking about.
Can you just real quick tell us Pride? Can you put it in a snapshot when you said a protest? Can you say anything?
A protest basically is...
What happened?
Well, yeah, and so, you know, history cites it beginning in the 60s in Stonewall in New York, led by two transgender women, one Black, one Latina, basically saying, we ain't had enough.
Oh.
And if we can't have it, y'all ain't gonna have it. We're gonna burn it down. That's
What'd you say? Was somebody pressuring too
I have to
much?
point this
I
out.
love
I
it.
just learned this on Clubhouse.
Yeah.
There
I
was
did too.
actually a Black
Like a
lesbian.
female.
Yes, Stormy Larry.
That's
Laura
right.
who was being arrested, and they were abusing her, and she's looking at everyone watching saying, why are you just watching? And, but
They
she
went off.
never gets the credit.
And this is why we have such an opportunity to highlight and elevate our experience, because Stormy was Black, she was also a lesbian. So there's a space to elevate her.
I'm shocked you know her name.
Yeah, and that's why we have so much of a responsibility to make sure that we don't lose our history. Because if we don't lift us up, who will? And so
And lift each other up.
and lift
That's
each other up.
right.
Yeah, and so I say this all the time. We don't personally have to represent an experience to be supportive of its wellness. Yes. So Black Global Pride also because when we look at the Black experience across the globe, people are still fighting for their lives, quite literally. So we know the Black American experience to be centered more so around celebration and festivity, but there are people right now who can't live openly out, or once they're found out, they are stoned or murdered, or women are raped and killed. And it's all these things that when we look at the global experience of the Black LGBTQ plus diaspora, we have an opportunity to show up in which we have not sort of historically. And so this gives all of the Black people around the world to show up for each other in a way in which we have never seen.
Isn't that wonderful? What sparked it?
So, and the organization, the leadership team of Global Black Pride represents the Black experience from around the world. So we have representation throughout the entire continent of Africa, the Caribbean, America, indigenous folks. And so again, looking at how do we bring resources, bring visibility, bring strengths to lift up the opportunities of Black people, but also create a global celebration. We know if Black people can't do nothing else, we can have a good time. And so the idea of being able to tap into those indigenous experiences and the Caribbean experiences and even the American experiences and bring that to a global scale, that will serve a few purposes. Of course, that will continue to move forward the work, but it'll show us that we do have a unified opportunity that allows us to show up as Black people across the
You
globe.
made me sit up straighter.
Well, come on, sit up. But along with that is that we're also having a human rights conference as a part of that as well, because we don't want to sort of miss the movement behind the glitter. And so there is very necessary that we are calling to the table, not just sort of elevating Black leaders, but how are we holding institutions and organizations around the globe accountable to uplifting Black LGBTQ plus needs.
Yeah, and what I was just about to ask you, since the movement here in America was kind of instigated in protest, and so now as the global movement is developing and growing, is it more celebratory, or do they still need globally in a lot of these countries to still function in protest? Because I can only imagine in places like the Caribbean where these brave people are putting themselves in danger. So then how might they get support? You know, are there ways for countries that have actually moved a lot further ahead be more supportive to those places that are recently blooming? Or
Yeah, and I think that's great, and that's a very necessary part of the conversation. And so this global platform creates an opportunity for us to lift those needs in a way that is consistent, concise, and accurately responsive. And so, you know, I think we have done, I'd say, a disservice in the sense of, well, if we don't hear you, then you're not getting nothing. And so that's been our Black American experience, and we have, as Black Americans, created movements in the sense of, this is how we get results. And, you know, gratefully so, we have seen results. But recognize it doesn't necessarily translate the same on the global scale. And so we can look at, again, this is one reason why the Human Rights Conference is so important, is this creates opportunities for us to look strategically at how do you translate mobilization in the country in which you are. I think Americans have done a poor job of that as well. It's like, well, this is what we do, and so we're gonna take it over there and y'all just get on board. And we know that does not serve the global populace. And then when you layer in, you know, Black and, you know, LGBTQ plus and, you know, of low socioeconomic status and low education status and all this, you know, it almost does a disservice, and it's, you know, very blatant and blazing for us to go over and say, well, this is what we're gonna do. You girls get in line with us and we'll see you next year. So, you know, again, creating these opportunities where folks can be, what I say, in the driver's seat of their own story, creating spaces for people to share their own narratives in a way that is empowering and compelling, but also allows us to respond.
I wanted to let you know about an organization called the Rainbow Railroad. And what they do is they will fund or pretty much help someone who lives in a country that actually persecutes and kills people for being gay. They will fly them out and house them in another country and kind of get their life started afresh.
There's also an organization actually on our leadership team, Kaleidoscope, which is led by Lady Phil in the UK, that does similar work supporting some global movement. And also Global Black Gay Men Connect, which is based in America but does global work similarly. So there are some global organizations that folks can locally get connected to either support the resources or volunteerism or a host of other ways.
Well, you are busy doing stuff not only locally, so we're going to take a break.
Yes.
We're going to come back and enjoy some dessert, and we're going to talk romance.
Okay, now.
How do you find time?
Okay, bring on the dessert.
So before we went to break, Cheryl, we were talking about all of the wonderful things you're doing. Let's get your dessert here.
Wonderful.
Cheryl's Charlie horse.
Well,
since
since I feel like I fed you guys heavier earlier today, I'll just give you a light dessert, but something with a little kick in it. Drunken Peanut Butter Cup. Peanut butter meets chocolate meets vodka. This dessert is for the grown and sexy while satisfying your sweet tooth.
Oh.
Okay.
Whoa. Beautiful,
All right.
beautiful.
Drunken Reezy.
You better preach.
So we were talking about all the wonderful stuff that you're doing in the world, and you know, Chris and I were kind of joking and saying,
Where do you have time for romance? So we don't want to be presumptuous, but we do like to give people an opportunity to talk about the fullness of who they are.
Yeah, so I have been, like you said, exceptionally busy. So that has left a vacancy in the romance department.
Lucky you. Oh,
But on purpose. I was in a relationship a few years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm going to take a break. And next thing you know, a break turned into like 3 years.
a peace of mind.
But no, I mean, I definitely am open to dating. I have been recently seeing someone. I'm really excited about it. You know, it's been maybe 3 months. So we're going to just see what's what. And yeah.
Is it difficult? I mean, you're involved in, global initiatives, you're opening businesses and launching organizations consistently. Because a lot of guests that we talked to before talks about how as you are successful, as you are committed to community, and as you're building things, finding partners becomes a little bit more challenging. I don't know if that's been your experience, but I'm curious as to how do you date and how do you navigate the complexities of dating when you have all of these other things that are really important commitments?
So interestingly so, it has not been difficult sort of in the traditional sense. I think one thing is like aligning kind of goals, aligning sort of lives. Somebody has to be mission driven to a degree to be with the man who's mission driven. And, if we can be honest, a lot of folks don't really care that much from my experience. And so, it hasn't been difficult. I mean, folks are social in that regard, but, when we look at sort of aligning purposes, it looks a little, from my experience, has looked a little differently. Yeah.
What made you care so much?
Auntie, that is a good question. I think when we trace it back, so much of it from my experience probably traces back to the church. So I was raised in the church, third generation minister. I'm actually a minister myself as well.
Wow.
Add one more thing to the list.
Okay.
But yeah, and so I've always been active in service and, uplifting the poor, the least among us and advocating.
Oh,
And
I
it's
love
just
the way you just switched that.
What's that?
What you say from poor to, and we're not poor. Yeah. I always say broke is a situation, poor is a state of mind.
That's good.
What you say, the least among
That's
us.
right.
Yes.
Right. And a lot of times that connects to a system. And so my work with the sort of public health social services has been me asking, how do I look at the system? You can look at the individual. How do we look at the system? And so my work with the church, I think, really has sort of informed why I care so much.
Are you a part of the traditional black church?
Oh, goodness. I don't know how much time we got. But yeah, I was raised very staunchly religious. I mean, evangelical Christian. Couldn't wear shorts, couldn't watch TV, all those.
And from where? Louisiana?
From Louisiana. Yeah. And so it wasn't until I was maybe in my late teens where I really started to kind of, see the world more broadly. And like I told my mother, I had believed that God was bigger than this God that y'all gave me. And so went on this sort of journey of discovery and gratefully so really found a really rich sort of what I say reconciliation that's allowed me to sort of represent God to a lot of people.
My mother has suffered, through time of me I had a kid at 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I was gay, then I was straight, and now I just don't claim. So now she's in church with her church members.
Mm-hmm.
And they was wearing her out about this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she called me Sunday. I went off. She brought up, mother so-and-so brought up her son was supposed to get in the tub, and he said he don't get in with no gay people. And I said, people are good. My daughter on a show and it's teaching us not be so judgmental with our Bibles. I was like, nah, you finally stood up.
Mm-hmm.
We must know that when we point a finger, look at the ones pointing back at us.
Yeah.
We human beings, all of us. Love who you want.
When you're looking for love, do you gravitate to black men?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I have been speaking very globally and, worldly and such, but I am a man of black love. Okay. No shade to nobody else. Yeah.
Well, I always say chocolate, baby. I'm watered down by the one, but that dog, chocolate, baby.
I mean, don't get me started
They
now.
talking about black don't crack. That's not true. Chocolate. Better check that catwalk. You are simply, I'm telling you. It
From my experience,
can't get chocolate enough.
I do agree.
Dark and light, and now it's vanilla and chocolate, baby. Let's get it twisted. I always say them enslavement demons, they did their job.
Yeah.
House feel, black, white, no, baby, we vanilla and chocolate.
And I think this is a good way of even tying it in too for us to really center ourselves again too, celebrate, you mentioned complexion, the richness of who we are, but again, there's so many levels and layers of who we are to where we cannot have enough opportunities to celebrate us. Yeah.
Do you think it's co-opting Juneteenth to celebrate Black queerness on that day?
Absolutely not. When we look at even historically the March on Washington, in 1963, we always cite Dr. King and the great work that he has done, but that was a black gay man, Bayard Rustin, who was the architect of that movement.
Say his name again.
Bayard Rustin, and I cite
Y'all
him.
look him up, Google him.
Yes, and so saying that to say, while we are still identifying and naming many folks, queer folks, black queer folks who have been behind movements, some names we will never know. Some took those parts of themselves to the grave, but they were always there. And so we pay homage to our ancestors, the ones who died, and we're not able to show up fully when we are able to bring ourselves into those spaces. So
And it provides an opportunity for recognition.
For recognition. Even when we do not know their names, we can still bring them into the space.
I mean, it has been so wonderful having you.
Full circle.
And we want you to know, Gerald, that once you come to the house, you're what?
Family!
Thank you
Back and
so
see
much.
us.
Yes, I would love to. If y'all have me back, I'll be back. Yes.
10 toes down, you boots on ground, baby. Love you for it.